So please join with me in prayer. Taking this deep breath, knowing that there is only one. This one life, this one mind, this one heart that just saturates this entire existence. I call it God, I call it Spirit. It is Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Shakti, the great mystery, whatever name you want to give it. It is this ineffable singularity that I see all around me. And so I bring my awareness to everything in this blessed sip of life. The way the hummingbird siphons the nectar from that vermilion-drenched flower. You better take that, it's God calling. The clementine light of the river at sunrise. And the fiery sunset hues of the marigold that is emblazoned across this earth. It is all of this. We could not be separated from it. There is not a spot that this divine presence is not, and as such, I know that I am of it. I am this representation of that ineffable energy, that ineffable source of life in this physical body. I contain all of those God qualities, all that love, all that light, all that life, all the power, peace, beauty, and joy, all that resides within me, and this is the truth for each one here as well, that each one cannot be separated out from this divine presence. It is their divine birthright to know this, to feel this, to be this in each and every moment. And so in this sacred gathering, I embrace the realization that every word spoken, that every note played, that every gesture shared contains all the transformative power that the divine offers. And so I affirm that this gathering of that one mind beckons each one to unclench their fisted heart, to release any burdens or limitations that may have been brought in with them, and to surrender to that vastness of the divine. And so it is with great gratitude that I speak this word. Thankful for all that I've gathered, thankful for this time spent in communion with the one, and forever grateful for that law that always says yes. Yes, my beloved, it is so, as you wish. And so I release, I give over, I succumb this word to that law, knowing that it is done, that it was manifest before this word was even spoke, and I simply say, and so it is.
So it is. So our talk today is Standing on Shiva. And we're looking at a whole year long of living out loud, living fully, living out loud, being our full self. And this month we're talking about speaking truth to circumstance, which is a little play on speaking truth to power, but true power doesn't need truth spoken to it because true power lives as and in truth. And so it's the circumstances that look like power but are really control that we have to speak to. So, standing on Shiva, there's a Hindu story of a battle taking place between the gods and the demons. And the gods are losing. Ooh, that's not a good thing. And so the gods turn to Durga, known as the goddess of compassion and mothering, to do something. And out of her forehead, out of her third eye, springs the fierce warrior goddess Kali. And Kali proceeds to destroy the demons. But in her frenzy, she began killing everybody else, including more gods. And so eventually, Shiva, who's the destroyer of illusion, the place of absolute truth, throws himself underneath her feet and grounds her back into that truth, grounds her back into who she really is so she can stop mindlessly killing. When we go to war with conditions out there, when we try and do battle with what seems like that out there, we can get lost in the battle, forgetting our real purpose. So grounding in truth brings us back to remembering who we are and why we are doing what we're doing, rather than getting caught up. Has anybody besides me ever gotten caught up in a little frenzy of stuff? You know, yeah. So last week we talked about being hypnotized, and the spells of illusion can be very persuasive. Have you noticed? And they can drive us crazy because there are so many demons to fight. Have you looked around the world? And have you looked inside? There are so many demons to fight, and there are so many things to do. We can get pulled far from the truth that we know. We can get into a frenzy from which it's difficult to return. So this Hindu story has several symbolic elements. So first, the nature of the demon king that they're dealing with has a gift or a superpower that any drop of his blood that touches the ground immediately produces a duplicate. So you slice them a little bit, now you got two to deal with. You slice either one of them, you got more to deal with, right? Now, those of us who garden will recognize that as a quality of certain weeds, yes? You know, you go to pull the one weed out and it shoots all of its seeds out, and all of a sudden you've taken the one out and you got 20 more growing. So this archetype, which shows up in many cultures and many weeds, represents the idea that no matter how hard we try, the problem we're trying to solve, the evil we're trying to defeat, just grows back. Have you noticed? How many of you have tried to change a habit within yourself only to have it keep on growing back? Yep. I still keep getting pulled to bakeries. Now, I don't give in to the pull, but it still goes, You could just do one. So there seems to be no solution, and we can become tired and hopeless. And in this story, the gods have become hopeless. So out of that hopelessness, losing hope, they turn to Durga, the goddess of compassion, because they've tried every weapon they have, every power that they have, all the great strength that they have to defeat these, and none of them have worked. So they turn from all these great powers to the softness of compassion, to the mothering goddess. Compassion. Compassion is defined in the Merriam-Webster dictionary as sympathetic consciousness of others' distress, together with a desire to alleviate it. Not just being conscious of others' distress, but having a desire to alleviate it. And it's that second part, the desire to alleviate it, that moves compassion out of ineffective pity. We're called to alleviate suffering, others and our own. And we tend to think of compassion as being a soft virtue, that mothering energy being a soft, loving energy. But if you've ever heard stories of people who come in between a mother bear and her cubs, or come between a mother and her children, you know that that mothering energy is not always soft, is it? So from Durga's third eye, from her consciousness, springs Kali. And we have a slide depicting a little picture of Kali. And like almost all the gods in Hindu, she's blue-skinned. And she has the perfect tools and tactics for the job. She has a bowl to catch the demon's blood so it doesn't hit the ground. And she has the ability to devour his duplicates, that's that tongue out, until she finally severs his head. And this can represent the idea that as we prevent the seeds of suffering from landing in the ground of our consciousness, they no longer replicate. We can take that slide down. I know it's not the prettiest image to have. It's a powerful image. A couple of weeks ago, I quoted from Plotinus, a Greek philosopher Plotinus, who said, "I do not argue, I contemplate. And as I contemplate, I let fall the seeds of thought into the mirror of mind, which becomes the mirror of matter." I do not argue, contemplate. But it takes a fierce, focused consciousness to be able to do that. That's why Kali looks so fierce. And we, when we're going for it, have to have that fierceness. I had a friend who, now a couple of decades ago, was in Thailand studying meditation with a meditation teacher. And one day they were out walking, and all of a sudden the teacher looked at her, and they were kind of in a grassy area, and the teacher suddenly said, "Tiger!" Which there were plenty of tigers in that area. And she's like, on alert. And he goes, and that's how you have to do meditation. With that fierce focus. It's not just this kind of sitting softly and, oh yeah, la la la, whatever. It's that fierce focus on truth, on the reality, on the breath, on whatever it is we're contemplating. The word evil, I've talked about this before, is simply the word live spelled backwards. When we can let go of the idea that evil is some horrible force out there and see that it is simply people forgetting their true nature, living backwards, using the life force to create harm and devastation instead of creating greater expressions of aliveness, of love, of joy, which, if we're all honest, we've all done at some point in our lives, yes? Breathe. This gives us an idea of how to overcome the experience of evil by flipping it into alignment with life. I had a teacher who loved to work with prisoners because he said prisoners were on a journey. They were going somewhere. They were at least using their energy. And he said it was so much easier to just turn them around because they were already in motion. He said the hardest thing was to take people who were just sitting on their dead you-know-whats, bottoms, because he said it took a stick of dynamite underneath them to get them into any motion. So when we have people who are doing things, it's easier to flip them because at least they're in motion. When we no longer provide a ground for the idea of evil in our minds, we will see people and circumstances differently. I quoted a couple weeks ago from the quantum physicist Max Planck, who said, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So in our story, Kali absorbs the seeds of the demon, the duplicates of the demon, but eventually they grow within her, enough within her that she begins to embody the very evil that she's fighting. And it takes the act of Shiva throwing himself under her feet to return her to her true self. Richard Rohr, in his book Falling Upward, says, we all become a well-disguised mirror image of anything we fight too long or too directly. I will modify that by saying we become well-disguised to our own thinking. Everybody else sees it, right? Yeah. Everybody else sees it. But we become a well-disguised mirror image of anything we fight too long or too directly. That which we oppose determines the energy that frames the questions after a while. Most frontal attacks on evil just produce another kind of evil in yourself, along with a very inflated self-image to boot, and incites a lot of pushback from those you have attacked. Ernest Holmes has called for us to be a people who are for something and against nothing. And this is why to be for something. What am I really for? What do I really want here? We can start off by saying, I don't want this anymore, but the next thing is, what do I really want? What is it I'm really going for? And that's what we put our attention on. If we just keep fighting what we don't want and don't want, A, we'll go nuts after a while, and B, we'll never get anywhere. What do we really want? Shiva has several aspects, one of which is the destroyer of illusions. So standing in capital T truth, standing in enlightenment, becoming enlightened, is being free of our delusions and our illusions about both ourself and the world out here. It's becoming free of illusion. In the Christian story of the Gospel of John, Jesus has just been baptized by John, and the clouds part, and a voice in the cloud comes out and says the same thing that God says to every one of us all the time. You are my beloved, in whom I am well pleased. In case you haven't heard that voice, it's talking to you. Just listen. It's there. And the very next thing Jesus does is heads out to the desert for 40 days to face his demons. We can realize that we are the love of God, the inspiration of God, totally beloved. And the next thing we'll recognize is, and the only person that's blocking that is me, ourselves. He recognizes that he can't fully accept and express the fullness of this blessing until he is free of his own delusions and illusions. And if you read the Gospels, it's a practice that Jesus did often. Oftentimes after he's just had a big confrontation, they say the next thing he does is heads out to the desert, which is coming back to the place where he can stand on Shiva. Each of us must encounter Shiva if we are to come to our senses and awaken from our hypnosis. Each of us has to do that. Shiva is considered one of a trio of gods who are responsible first for creating, and then for maintaining the creation, and finally for destroying the creation so that something new can come out. And Shiva is that destroyer. Spirit is forever, as Ernest Holmes says, forever taking form and forever deserting the form which it has taken. It is forever taking form and is forever deserting the form. Nothing lasts forever in form. Truth lasts forever. The nature, the essence of it lasts forever. Love lasts forever, but the form it takes changes. Have you noticed? Life lasts forever, but the form changes. As we recognize that idea that this too shall pass, we can gain a calm knowing that it is simultaneously important to slay the demons of our time. That's important. While recognizing that they too shall pass. And yes, new demons will arise, but the current ones are ours to slay, to deal with what is in front of us. Leave the future demons for future Kalis. What we can do is leave a legacy, a roadmap of how to slay demons for others to follow. Not through making wrong, not through separation, fear, or anger, but through compassion and recognizing our oneness with what we have labeled as demons. We must take on the demons, both within us and outside of us, realizing that they and we will all pass. And we can tend to get caught up in the rocks, if you will, of wanting instant results, which is its own demon. I want what I want, and I want it right. Those of us who are Doors fans remember when Jim Morrison in one of his songs said, I want the world and I want it now. Or we want the world and we want it now. We want a world that works for all, and we want it when? Right now. It's time to recognize that while the divine is fully present right here, right now, if it were to be revealed to us, we would be blown out of existence. Any of you who saw the movie, the last Indiana Jones movie, not the one that's out now, but the previous one, The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, there was one of the characters in that wanted all the knowledge of these beings, and finally gets it, and at first she's really happy with it, and all of a sudden she's being blown away by it, and it's just like, no, make it stop. Moses was warned not to look at the face of God, because it would dissolve him, destroy him. Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, upon seeing the fullness of Krishna as God, cried out that he wanted to return to his normal state of seeing and his normal relationship with Krishna as his friend. So we must allow the flow of the divine to move at a pace we can handle. Breathe. And trusting that that pace, and that during that pace, we are still safe. Ernest Holmes says there is no process of healing. And the reason there's no process of healing, there's another lovely saying that I love, and it's actually in one of our bathrooms out there. There is nothing to be healed, only truth revealed. When we recognize who we really are and what we really are, everything that seemed to be unhealed dissolves, resolves. So he says there's no process of healing, but there is generally a process in healing. And this process is the time and the effort we undergo in our realizations of truth. I don't know about you, but it takes me some time to recognize this. And sometimes that time seems like a 2-step forward, 1-step back dance. Sometimes it's a 1-step forward, 2 steps back dance. It takes time. And we have to give ourselves permission and love ourselves enough to take that time to allow the movement of spirit to work through and with and as us. To move at a pace that we can handle. Out of our compassion for the world, our compassion, we must take action to alleviate suffering. We must take action to alleviate suffering. Otherwise, we're just pitying spectators, hoping and wondering if possibly some good will come along. Yet our actions will be far more effective if, like Kali, we understand what really needs to happen and what we really want to create instead. We can remember the saying that if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a... If we truly want to create a world that works for all, we will be called outside of our comfort zones. We will be called to use methods that may feel unfamiliar to us. Ooh, I'm so sorry. But we will be called to use methods that seem and feel unfamiliar. Sally Kempton, in her book, Awakening to Kali, the Goddess of Radical Transformation, which is a great book, says whether Kali seems terrifying, fascinating, or loving depends on our state of consciousness and our level of both emotional and spiritual development. But she always invites us to a radical form of ego transcendence. A radical form of ego transcendence. As we face demonic seeming circumstances and people, we must first stand on the ground, and I love our stuff, back to the earth, back to that truth, stand on spiritual principles of oneness, of love, of spiritual law, of the creative process. If you've taken any of our classes recently, you know that we have kind of defined 10 spiritual principles about our teaching to work with, to stand on those principles. And then engage in practices that support us in experiencing those principles, that are the Shiva under our feet. So we don't go into a frenzy killing off everything. So meditation, prayer, spiritual mind treatment, visioning, asking what is Spirit's highest idea here, instead of what does my ego or my fear or my anger want. Practicing self-awareness through meditation, journaling, and especially working with a practitioner. Don't face demons alone. Work with a practitioner, because oftentimes we don't even see our own internal demons. They're just running us, and they seem so normal. They take sometimes the reflection of somebody else who's conscious, who can help support us with that. And these are other practices of self-care that are necessary for the journey through the valley of the shadow of death, or the battlefield of gods and demons. And finally, patience and compassion, both for ourselves and others. You know, if we were teachers in school, we would find a way to work with all the children, including even the slowest children, to find a way to bring them along. And so we must compassionately support the learning of all of us, to bring all of us along to a higher and better way of being. We have to, as the song says, let everybody into the circle. I have a moment. I think we're going to hear that song pretty soon. I can see the future. So this week, spiritual practice. Notice an area of suffering which is calling you for healing. It could be within you, within your own life. It could be in the world. But just become aware of that. And the next step is ask to clearly see the demons screaming there, so that you can become aware of the seeds which must be absorbed and healed. If you can't see your enemy, if you can't see what you have to deal with, then you're working blind. So the first thing you want to do is be able to see, what am I working with? What's the real demon? What are the real seeds that are happening? And then ask, what is Spirit's highest vision here? What must I become and what must I release in order to allow whatever it is to show up, in order for healing to happen? What is Spirit's highest idea? What must I become? What must I release? This is that radical form of ego transcendence. And then finally asking, what action does Spirit want to take as and through me? Are you willing to play with that spiritual practice this week? Great. Me too. I want to close with a quote from a very wise person. Without a strong spiritual practice, we can get caught up in the latest cause for alarm and calls to extreme action. There are always news stories blaring outrage at us. When we take the time to stand on Shiva, to stand in truth, we will see past the frenzy, past the illusions, past the thunder and lightning, to the essence of a situation. Only then are we able to create effective solutions. Only then are we able to apply the creative process in life-enhancing ways. And we have an affirmation that I invite you to say with me. I wake up to the truth of Spirit that I am. Let's do that one more time. I wake up to this truth of Spirit that I am. And so it is. I invite you to take a look around and see the faces of God. Remember that your face is one of those faces. Connect heart to heart. And let this circle be filled with love. Knowing that there is one infinite presence. One, I love it when Tim talks dirty with big words, ineffable singularity. One life, only one. It is pure life, it is pure love, it is pure wholeness. It is joy, always. Whether we remember it or forget it, it still is. And because it is all that there is, each of us and each of everything in form is one of this infinite presence. And so we already are the life, the love, the wholeness, the joy that the divine is. Again, whether we remember it or forget it, we still are that. And so I speak my word from this knowing of truth. We embody that and express that in our lives ever more fully, that we stand on the truth of who we really are, letting the clouds of forgetting dissolve into the nothingness, the no-thingness that they are. In the face of true love, in the face of true compassion, in the face of truth itself, no, quote, demon can exist. And so we let ourselves be that light, that love, that joy, that wholeness, that infinite presence in form, uniquely as each of us. We bring our gifts, we share our gifts, knowing that they are perfect. And in gratitude for this practice, in gratitude for this process, in gratitude for this knowing, I simply release this word into a law that moves it into form, expression, and experience because it already is so in the infinite mind and is now established as so in our minds. And we simply affirm that and align with that together by saying, and so it is.